fellow travelers, and welcome to another episode of the Diverse Stars podcast third season. How my loyal listeners, thank you for your continued support. It's an amazing episode because Andy Lanning and Anthony Williams return to the mothership to discuss Legendari, the Fall of Mira Prime from MetaTravelers. Now come aboard as we go traversing the stars. Hi, Mr. Lanning, Mr. Williams. Thank you so much for coming back to the Diverse Stars podcast.
Thanks, Jeff, for having us back.
Absolute pleasure.
My pleasure.
We were surprised we were allowed back. Thank you.
Welcome back anytime, especially with your project. Every time you do a project, you guys, it just looks increasingly more cool than the last one. So glad to have you back.
Thank you.
So now you're the team behind the Legendari, the Fall of Mira, which is a graphic novel based on a MetaTravelers line of action figures and books. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes. Yes.
So how do you guys get involved in this project?
Shall I take that, Ant?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So Ant and I, we've been working with the MetaTravelers team for, I think it's about 3 years now. Actually, they launched some digital avatars back in the day, based on some science fiction characters that they'd invented called the Nibiru. And these were sort of digital, fully rigged CG digital avatars that people could buy. This was in the depths of COVID, when the idea being, everyone will be migrating to the metaverse, and it's like, give people a chance to have fully animated avatars that could be them and represent them online. And the guys always had much bigger ideas of taking that idea and turning it into an IP. And so Ant and I helped them by developing a story world around the MetaTravelers, of which the Nibiru are one of the alien races. And we did I think it was 35 episodes of motion comics for them, which you can find on YouTube. Was it 35?
I think it was in the 60s.
Oh, really? I thought it was 35. Oh, well.
Yeah, it was a lot.
Anyway, it was. I do know that it came out at almost an hour and a half, hour and 20 minutes worth of stuff. So it's almost like a movie length of motion comics that we did. Each episode was something like 2-3 minutes. And we got to tell a really cool adventure story there. And then the guys coming out of COVID, and that decided to look at other ways they could explore this world they'd created. And they and I don't know how they managed to do this, but they hooked up with the Four Horsemen, the action figure studio, who the guys who started off at Todd McFarlane Toys. They were the original Todd McFarlane Toys crew. So that the quality of what those guys do is amazing, absolutely amazing. And then they went off and set up their own studio called the Four Horsemen, and they've developed action figures. They've based it on licensed stuff, but they've also developed their own action figures. Marco and Jeremy, who are the guys behind MetaTravelers, got talking to them, and they decided they were going to take the MetaTravelers and create a range of action figures, as you do. And they designed and worked on a whole sort of like first wave of these figures, and they launched it as a Kickstarter project. I think that was November last year, wasn't it? I believe. I think that's when.
Yeah. But no, it might even go back a few months earlier than that. But yeah, it was in development for probably a good 8-10 months before that, and then a hugely successful Kickstarter project then. Which, sorry, I'm slightly distracted because a collie dog has just invaded this podcast, but but that's par for the course, as Andy knows when we're on one of these calls. But yeah, so yeah, as you've seen with the action figures, they didn't do anything by half measures. They're absolutely stunning, and the amount of work that has gone into the design. And not just visually how they look, and that they're part of this world, this whole huge ecosystem that they're building for these characters to live in, which kind of leads into what we're doing with them now.
Well, and just to that, because sort of like join the dots up, is that all the characters they did as the individual action figures. And one of the very cool thing, by the way, is that they're all interchangeable. So you could take the head off one and put it on the body of the other, and the arms and stuff like that. So they're kind of like Mr. Potato Head, you know, but a very, very hardcore sci-fi version of Mr. Potato Head that's been you know, worked on by some absolutely genius action figure designers. So Ant did the box art for the figures and art for the campaign, and I wrote character bios of all of the characters, so weaving them into the sort of story world that we'd already created. And this was a thing because, like Ant said, you know, there were several months worth of development that went on. The campaign was successful, and this is the bit I'm totally unaware of, but it takes a hell of a long time to then produce action figures. So the campaign was successful in November. The figures won't be delivered to people until November this year. So it takes a whole year for them to be manufactured, shipped out, and then dispatched. So Jeremy and Marco, again, like I say, we love their vision because they're very true to the fan base and the people who support them. And they were like, well, these guys, you know, we love the fact that these, you know, people have backed this campaign. We want to reward them for their support. And so knowing there's a whole year between fulfillment and the campaign being successful, they said, well, what can we do? Can we maybe do some graphic novels? They didn't want to do a motion comic series because that's there's a hell of a lot of work that goes into that and it takes forever. So we decided to put together a story, graphic novel story that basically tells the backstory to all of those figures. There's sort of like this whole event. The Nibiru, the characters from the digital avatars, live on a planet called Mira Prime, and we you know, as the title gives away, this is the story of the fall of Mira Prime. I don't think there's no spoilers there. But it involves all of the characters that are the action figures. So if you've invested in buying the action figures, you'll end up with a hopefully a series of 4 graphic novels that tell this big story and feature all, you know, your character or characters depending on how many of them you bought. So and so we've formatted it as there's a main story that's about 20 pages long, and we're doing sort of 10-page backup story, one that Ant drew, called the Pale Kings. The main story is being drawn by the wonderful Gustavo Vargas, who's just an insanely talented artist, famous for his Peruvian cyberpunk books. Again, you know, that's a category you never knew existed, so which I think he's cornered the market in. And then we've also taken the motion comic stories that we did that I explained to you earlier, and we've taken those and flattened them down into actual print page comics as well, so you get to read. You can read that story if you didn't actually see it. All of which is wrapped up, like I say, with some behind the scenes stuff, plus alternate covers by Ant. There's one by Gustavo, one by our good friend Todd Nock, and one by our other good friend Liam Sharp. We say good friends because you know, we grabbed them and asked them to do us a favor, basically.
So, I mean, you guys are kind of like the Stan Lee and Jack Kirby of this universe that you're creating. You're creating this massive universe. You're kind of creating the character Bibles for these characters. This is kind of ambitious, to say the least, right? So, how do you go about developing this universe? How do you flesh it out? How do you create the visual language for the universe as well? How do you make this go beyond something that it's a simple toy just to a fully fleshed out universe that I imagine is going to be ever expanding if everything works well?
Yeah.
Well, I think. Sorry.
No.
All I was going to say. This is the problem with the two-hander, isn't it? I think. I mean, because Andy and I do this quite a lot for various other people as well, and we bring our what's probably about 70 years worth of comic book and storytelling experience between us, you know, to bring that to bear. But with something like this, the source material offers so many opportunities to build those worlds because and you know, Andy was referring to Jeremy and Marco, the guys behind this. They're not just about creating something in a vacuum. They want to build these worlds, and they'd already gone a little way down the road. So for us, the foundations are there, and it gives us an opportunity to then build on top of those, you know. So and they're incredibly collaborative. They're creative people as well themselves. So so there's a huge amount of back and forth we have with them, which helps us to do that.
So when you're creating the visuals, Mr. Williams, once again, you're basing it off the action figures. But action figures are these three-dimensional objects, you know, plastic. How are the issues with translating them, making them look as interesting visually on a two-dimensional page as they are as an action figure, or the things that you had to tweak or change and be like, this doesn't work for the comic book, or needs to be readjusted when you think about it as an action figure?
I mean, I mean, they are very, they have a sort of comic book feel to them anyway, which action figures, you know, often do. But there always are challenges, obviously. I mean, because to create dynamic, you know, poses, etc., an action figure won't necessarily do that. So there's a little bit of, you know, there's a little bit of cheating going on there, you know. But what you do is you make sure for the hero shots and everything, you know, you're as on point as you can be. But also part of the appeal of having more than one artist doing stories is you're getting the interpretation of those characters as well, you know. So there is latitude there to be able to do that. When I was doing the box art, and I'm just doing a second wave now, those are far more on point, I would say, where you're very cognizant of all the tiny detail and all the beautiful detail that's gone into the design of them, and you're trying to replicate that. But even there are a few bits where you go, well, you know, just for the pose that I'm doing, there's a little bit of tweaking going on there.
Is there ever a question when you're creating the visuals that when you're looking at the action figure and looking at it from a comic book viewpoint, when you think this doesn't function? Like if it looks cool on like a figure when you're standing, when you're trying to make the body move and look active, it may not translate over correctly. Like, did you have to think like, well, I know that's not how it looks in the figure, but I got to make the body do this, or it's not going to be believable that the guy can move in this way?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit, but like I say, I mean, choosing the poses helps because you can hide a lot just by making sure that you know, a huge foreshortened shot is hiding the difficult bits that are going on there. But overall, you know, and I think as well, because action figures have developed so much and have so much articulation in them that you can you know, feel really reasonably confident that you can do a pretty good representation of them. You know, translate into the page.
These action figures were based off sort of like how they do it now is they do it in ZBrush, and so the action figures are almost sort of like rigged like a CG asset. So they were giving out reference photos of them posed in really cool poses anyway. And I think this is so. Ant and I have, you know, over our very long careers, we've worked with a lot of IPs, which means that you know, you've got to stay on point. If you're drawing Transformers, they've got to look like Transformers. If you're drawing, we started real Ghostbusters, they've got to look like the Ghostbusters and stuff like that. So when you're doing the pack art, like Ant said, he's got to make sure the detail is a hero shot of that toy. Whereas when you're doing the comic book, it's a different set of rules and different set of criteria that it's more down to what can I leave out and still make it look like the action figure. Because have you ever drawn Transformers? Have you ever done a Transformers comic?
Yeah, I did a little bit right in the early days, and I know
because
lots
that's
of
a
artists.
nightmare, isn't it? That's a
I was
nightmare.
going to say lots of artists love drawing Transformers. I'm glad I'd never drawn them since, but and I actually did. Yeah, I did a little bit of license start when the first movie came out, and that was even worse because the amount of detail in those designs is insane. But yeah, I mean, it's
sorry, Anne, I was just going to say, and there are some artists who excel at drawing Transformers. I think of Nick Rock and Jeff Senior, you know, who do it brilliantly. but I think they're slightly unhinged. Seriously, because they are so complicated, aren't they?
So another thing is when you're creating the graphic novel, you basically have to get the reader to feel comfortable and give some foundation for them to understand an entire universe.
Mhm.
However, because it's a story and you have to make it exciting, you can't just do exposition dumps for like 10 pages, but like, okay, so this is what this is what this is what it, and try to and kind of kill them with exposition dumps. How do you balance the world building, the getting the footing right for the readers, but keeping also exciting and moving at a decent pace?
Yeah, that's actually something we discussed from the outset. And we cheat basically, Jeff. What we do is we cheat. We employ that hoary old staple, which is the Star Wars crawl at the beginning. We do a in a universe. In fact, when you read the first page of the comic, it's even better if you read it and make it move up past your head. You'll get the full effect of it. So there's a little bit of a setup there because again, it's a nice way just to land you in the middle of the action, which is what we wanted to do. And then another thing we're employing is we're kind of, like I said, we have back behind the scenes material. We've also got almost like the Marvel Universe guidebooks type thing of in-world sort of bios of the characters and stuff, which will give you more insight into the world, the Nibiru and some of the characteristics about what's going on, which hopefully fleshes out some more of the story and gives everything a little bit more context. But you don't necessarily need that just to understand the story. You there's some bad guys, they're attacking, and the good guys are trying to defend the place. That's kind of like that's the setup.
Well, go ahead.
No, I'm just going to add that also, though, I think if we're doing our job right, you can drop somebody into a story. And I think this is what happens with this, and the world will unfold as you're going through the story. You can start at a fast pace, get the audience engaged, get them enjoying it, and then it all begins. It's like great movies do this, great fiction does this. Where it begins to form this world. You begin to see, oh right, now I understand why they were referencing that earlier. So I think we do that a lot. It's like get it fast moving, get the action in there, and engage the reader.
Now, for the listeners who don't know, the good guys are the Buru, and the bad guys
Nibiru,
are
yeah.
one more time.
The Nibiru.
Nibiru. I knew I had something wrong with the pronunciations. That was inevitable. And the bad guys are the Spyte.
Yes.
So when you think about the Nibiru, got it that right? Okay, got it right. The Nibiru. They're obviously being set up as the good guys. They lead the chain worlds, which is like this interconnected world network of worlds.
Yeah.
First, are they, when we think of them as good guys, are they then a good leadership? What motivated them to be this good governing body? And because they kind of fall apart right at the beginning of the story. And why does the Spyte decide that they are their targets?
So the Nibiru, if you think of the Nibiru and the Nibiru sort of empire, they're like space explorers. So in many ways, sort of like they're like the Federation from Star Trek. But they're mainly one singular alien race who've discovered the technology of an older alien race called the Aeon, which allows them to create portals, which allows them to create the chainworlds. They've got a unique physiology where they do a thing called conjoining, where they can. So rather than terraforming a planet to adapt to them, they adapt to planets. So they can interact with an indigenous life form, and they take on the characteristics of that life form, which allows them to adapt to planets. And so you end up with, there's Nibiru who are a singular alien race, but there's lots of different types of them because they've all adapted to different worlds that they live in. And the Spyte are actually a Nibiru who came across an alien life form that turned tables on them when they conjoined and tried to adapt to that life form. That life form possessed them. It was a particularly aggressive life form that acted like a symbiotic
parasite.
Yeah, like a parasite. So the Nibiru try to be symbiotic. The Spyte are like a parasite, basically. And because the Spyte have all the knowledge of the Nibiru, they want to possess the entirety of the chain worlds. And then what we've discovered now during the story is that there are other factions within the Nibiru who aren't necessarily as pure and good as the rest of the empire. They're not all as what's the dirty tricks thing in Star Trek, the one that oh god, DS something or other. There's like, so even within the Federation there are subsectors who are a little bit sort of black ops. And
Section 31.
Section 31.
Section
That's
31,
it.
yes.
Yeah. So it's like even within this very noble sort of like egalitarian society they've set up, there's a dark heart, or at least dark parts of it that we explore in this story.
So for the point of view of the Spite, from I don't know, maybe philosophical viewpoint, the Spite also, like say, want to conquer the chain worlds. For what purpose? Do they view that they're going to be better rulers, or they just want to take it over for power's sake? Is it the idea of just possession? What does their end goal look like, and why is that their end goal?
So the Spite at this point, because we've only ever met them as just this pure invading force, and again, let's use a Star Trek analogy. They're like the Borg. They just it's like submit and be absorbed into the collective, except they're much more in line with the parasitic analogy we were saying earlier, where they're like a virus. The virus's only goal is to replicate, move on, replicate, move on. And so that's how we've come to understand the Spyte so far in the motion comics that we explored. What we get insight into now in this story is that there's a bit more to the Spyte than just this mindless juggernaut that wants to conquer. There's something else going on there. There's more of a they've created their own alliances with other darker powers to basically get their own agenda sorted. So without going into spoiler territory, that's part of this story. Is we learn exactly what is their big goal. What are they all about? What's it all about with the Spyte?
So
Jeff, why are they so angry?
Well, there's a character in the story as well called Matt, named Matt, who's a human Earthling. Is Earth already part of the chain worlds, or were they supposed to become eventually part of the chain worlds? How do they function in the big picture?
So Matt is a character that comes from those early stories that we had created for the motion comics. For the first introduction of the Nibiru as avatars, and so Matt was our first port of call into what the bigger world story is for the Nibiru and for the MetaTravelers. So and it's kind of like because they're MetaTravelers, they travel through time and space, but mainly in their own space. And what's happened is the Nibiru who conjoins with Matt. That all happens by mistake. The Nibiru, I'm having trouble saying it. The Nibiru is injured and conjoins with Matt, and then basically vanishes. And so Matt finds himself literally trapped inside an alien body. His mind is existing in this place called null space, kind of like, again, there's no original ideas. It's kind of like Rick. What was his name? Help me out with Captain Marvel and Rick Jones.
Rick Jones.
Yeah. Like Rick Jones.
Yeah. Okay.
They would swap his mind would be somewhere, and except Matt is in charge of the body, whilst his mind is floating around in null space. And that becomes the adventure of the first story thread that we did, which like I say, it's kind of like the fish out of water thing. This thing turns up, they drag him to their world, and he gets caught up in the first invasion of the Spyte, which becomes the framing story for the story we're telling now. So we're kind of like bouncing backwards and forwards in time a bit.
Yeah, and to your point earlier about, how do you get people into the world and the story? To a certain degree, that's the function of Matt there as well. We're seeing this unfolding through his eyes, and he's confused by what's going on, and he's having to take all this in and be able to function within it and what have you. So it's a great way for to be able to get that across, and to be able to start to unfold everything, layer after layer of this whole universe.
So when we think about Matt, I know you said it's an accident that he was part of the conjoining. But however, how a lot of these stories work is that, as a trick of fate, the one guy who needs to have the thing has the thing. What is special about Matt that makes him not only a worthy candidate to have become conjoined with? Because I know this was an accident, but once again, fate plays his hand, and also to be a major player in this universe. What is special about him as the individual in the story?
Well, in fact, that's more the point with this as to what Ant was just saying is Matt is our POV. He's the reader's point of view for the story. And as such, there's nothing very special about him. He's just a regular guy. He's a bartender who in Vegas who does open mic nights with his guitar, singing his own songs, and he is literally caught up in this. And during the course of his story, which it hasn't even concluded yet as well, we've kind of, like I say, because we're bouncing backwards and forwards, there'll be a point, hopefully, at some, if we get to do more of these, where the two stories will combine, where maybe we do get an insight into why Matt is more special, or I kind of quite like the idea of Matt just grows into his responsibility. It's kind of like the Peter Parker thing, where it's like you've got these abilities, now do something with them, Whereas for the majority of the story, he's kind of like the guy going, "What's going on? Why me? I don't know what to do." By the end of it, he can do stuff, and he's sort of like growing into those powers. So, I think, before the end of that story, it's more about, rather than get me home, it's like I've got to help these people who have helped me.
Hmm. Now, I think at the end, I got to read one of the preview pages for the graphic novel, and there's a really cool character that shows up at the end of the preview pages that I saw. So I don't know if that's, I think maybe 8 or 9 pages in, called the Eternal Guardsman,
Yes.
who's one of visually fantastic looking characters. I mean, if that'd be the action figure that I would want, probably the Eternal Guardsman. What can you tell us about the character?
Well, and I mean, I think the cool thing with the Eternal Guardsman is and you can correct me on this end as well, but I think he was like a reward figure as part of the Kickstarter campaign who became unlocked as they got further down. So, and when you drew one of the first sort of group shots, the Eternal Guardsman was just a silhouette in the background, wasn't he?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, he was. But I think it was soon pretty obvious that this character was going to be extremely popular. So, and I mean, visually, I mean, you're right. I mean, looks incredible, looks absolutely amazing. And in this second wave of box art that I'm doing now, he's one of the characters that I'm doing on that. And yeah, there is something special about that character. And I think the prominence of this character became far greater in the stories because there was already feedback from the people who are buying the action figures, who are supporting the action figures. I mean, in fact, that played across all of the characters, didn't it, Andy? I mean, it's that really, it really raised some characters up and which made us realize that people want to know more about these characters. So then it's basically a case to throw it over to Andy. He said, right, everybody loves this. Who the hell is he? What's his motivation?
That was the cool thing is we already had backstories for them all. It was just more a question of the aggregate of which characters we chose was based on which ones were selling the best and which ones they'd had the most best feedback from. Eternal Guardsman, by the way, and with all of the action figures, if you go to either the Kickstarter campaign to the MetaTravelers page, you can still buy them. They're actually for sale. I mean, they're all pre-orders because they're not probably not been made yet still. But the Eternal Guardsman, my God, what a fantastic toy that is. It's because it's a big action figure and he's got this wingspan that makes him sort of like yay big. It's this absolutely amazing character, and and then from a story point of view becomes particularly relevant obviously in the first issue, things don't go so well for him. But that the whole notion of the Eternal Guardsmen and what they're about it sort of underpins ultimately where we go with the first main story arc.
Now, I'm pretty sure I got the name. I got the character's name right. So there's the Eternal Guardsman. The last page, he's confronting a member of the Spyte. Is that the Voidwalker? Who's in the red? The character in the
Obsidious is the guy. He's having a toe-to-toe with is a character called Obsidious.
So he was another one that looked amazingly cool. Now,
yeah.
It wasn't implied that there was some history there because they seem to know each other. Is there a history between those two characters?
And there's definitely a history from Obsidious's point of view, because again, the source of all of these characters is they are all Nibiru. So Obsidious, again, he's kind of like our, he's like a oh God, who are I'm having trouble thinking today. He's like the Sith. He's like an evil version of the Nibiru, and so therefore the Eternal Guardsmen are kind of like the Green Lantern Corps of the Nibiru, and where so Obsidious is, he's just corrupt and evil, and so therefore him having a chance to take on something that represents the absolute glowing goodness of the Nibiru. He's all about just bringing it down, because he's got this this staff that can actually literally suck the soul out of somebody, and so he knows that getting his hands on the essence of an Eternal Guard is only going to jack him up big time. So he's just a nasty bit of work basically, but looks again absolutely amazing.
So the Indiegogo campaign for the graphic novel is active right now. Between which days is it active for?
I think there's about another 10 days left, something like that. And
we've got a week left on it now, but I think the way Indiegogo works as well is you can continue beyond the campaign. So it's I think there's still the opportunity will still be there. But yeah, I mean, it's we do have a 7-day deadline on the actual campaign, and then I'm not sure how it switches into that next phase there. So I mean, best bet is to go and take a look at it now. And that's I mean, it is incredible value as well.
That's what I was just going to say, and it's like really, really good value. It's a whatever it is,
64 pages.
Yeah. And it works out that each one is about $16 for a 64 page graphic novel. Insane value for money.
Now, the people at MetaTravelers, at the very least, seem ambitious, right? So, are we pretty certain that we're going to move on to regular story, like regular issues, or something, ongoing stories with these characters, expanded universe comic books, these characters? How ambitious is MetaTravelers going to go with the comic book version of these?
So in the ideal version of this is that we do 4 of these, which tells this massive initial arc, and then the plan, I think, from the MetaTravelers guys' point of view, is to do more action figures. And if we do more action figures, that means there are more character stories that we get to develop, and so therefore we would love then to create more stories like this to support the ongoing development of the characters. And I think, to be fair, this sort of format and this sort of crowdfunding approach is ideal for this, because they couldn't do regular comics. It's like that they just would never make any sort of money back on that, and it would just be it's a lot of time and effort to create a regular 22-page comic book every month, whereas if you can do something like this as a special edition, it's out there for the fans of the book and for people who maybe want to try something new. It's not only something new, to support the action figures. They might then be interested in the action figures themselves, but more importantly, what you've got here is something that has got, there's some great artists involved in this. There's some really, I mean, the artwork, like you say, I'm just looking at the page with the Eternal Guardsman on it, and it's like, Gustavo's drawing some wonderful stuff in here, and we've got other great artists lined up to do more backup stories for the rest of the series. So hopefully it could be something that goes on, on a sort of regular basis. It would be awesome if we could make that work.
And the comic book just, I mean, looks awesome. The toys look awesome. I want, if your listeners, please check out the pages. Like I said, it looks like a universe that's worth exploring. And I think that's the most important part when you create something brand new, a new IP. So I want to thank you guys for coming on the show. You guys were both awesome. And when there's more to develop for this world, come right back.
Yeah, we definitely will. Jeff. Thank you again for having us.
Thank you so much, guys. Have a fantastic night.
Cheers.
And you too.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Versus Stars podcast. Please help me battle the algorithms by liking and subscribing. Be sure to turn for the next episode when Ishmael Saeed boards mothership to discuss my adventures with Superman. The next voyage, travel on.